What's good? Yesterday I did a video on how someone can grow wealthy or grow rich. But today, I'm not going to contradict what I say, but I'm going to expand upon it in a way that a lot of people get confused with. So, a few years ago I did a course, and the course was mainly about how can an artist become a creative entrepreneur, an artistic entrepreneur. That instead of just getting stuck working a 9 to 5 to find capital, you can look within your spirit, look within yourself, and bring out what's within to sustain you for the rest of your life. I've seen it. I've seen many people do it. I've seen many people be successful in it. But you see some people that aren't quite successful within it, but they've joined an organization or they've joined a company or they signed something very valuable away in exchange for a few moments or a few years within the spotlight without any real manageable way to maintain or pay back what they've gotten from that arrangement. And they end up in some very weird situations. So this video is entitled Breonna Taylor. I am going to talk about Breonna Taylor. And the greatest trick the devil ever played was trying to get you to believe that he doesn't exist. And then once that was accomplished, he tried to get you to believe that God didn't exist. And then that Jesus didn't exist, that Muhammad didn't exist, and that Buddha didn't exist, and that Abraham Lincoln was a racist. There is a force out there that doesn't necessarily want you to believe any specific thing. You can believe anything. You can say anything. But as long as you don't tell the truth, you keep your head on your shoulders. I would say that that same force, those archons, the way that they function, the way that they process, the way that they think, you gotta look at it as if everything is some kind of stage play. And I hate to put it like that, but Breonna Taylor represented the middle class. She represented the working poor. She represented Black Lives Matter. She recommended here angels and scrubs and heroes are here, that kind of thing. The essential workers that held up this economy in the past half year, God bless these people. God bless their families. God bless their entire lineage for generations and generations for the sacrifice that they made in their health and the risk that they took to get that cheddar. Something happens when you lose sight of what you started versus when you get consumed in the pursuit of money. So today I had a realization. This is going to be a very small sidebar. That my girlfriend started dating me, my fiance, mother of my child, love of my life, because I was a writer, She loves to read. She loves TV. She loves stories, and I was a writer. So as we got more involved, and there's a meme about that, I kind of lost sight of what it is that really brought us together. And it was me creating and her reading my stories and giving feedback and helping shape the vision of the story, kind of like Gaia and Father Time work together and work in tandem to take care of us, So I think a couple weeks ago, if not a month ago, I'm not sure how long ago it was, the information came out that there was going to be a $12 million settlement for Breonna Taylor's wrongful death. Something very similar happened, I suppose you could say, back in like the 50s to the 70s that fighting words is in our Constitution. It's within our laws that certain things that you can say are going to invoke a physical response from the other person in which that person is justified to whatever. Because they're incensed, they're in a state of insanity, they're in a state of dysphoria, So it's revolved around people saying the N-word, and so many people would report court cases and try to get people fired, try to fuck up people's lives because they say the N-word. Maybe rightfully so, maybe not rightfully so. In the eyes of the politician, all that shit's bad. Because none of it is progressive. None of it is going to either invoke conversation or stay convicted upon one point. It's not marketable, it's not sellable, it's not usable. So they kind of shut that down. People were getting paid out big for being called the N-word. And nowadays, everyone says the N-word. Why? Because what happened? There was another court case going further on, and then getting paid and profiting off of being called the N-word was no longer a thing. You can no longer carry that forward and carry a suit. You're still protected under fighting words, but you were no longer entitled to a payout based on the actions that you therefore took afterward. So what I worry about now is just like calling a black person, calling an African American the N-word, and how demoralizing that is for so many people. And now it's one of the most ubiquitously used words for the exact meaning that the world intentionally had. When people refer to each other as that, it doesn't matter. They're still degrading everybody. They're still degrading each other, They identify with that struggle. They identify with that poverty. They identify with that kind of lifestyle. So the lifestyle doesn't have a color. And I guess that was the decision, was that the Breonna Taylor case was not act of racism. But it doesn't matter whether or not it was an act of racism. This is the whole issue and the whole point. It does not matter whether or not it was an act of racism. It does not matter whether or not it was an act of white supremacy. A life was taken. And there are biblical laws holding us to that condemnation. They say that the difficulty was they couldn't identify which cop shot Breonna Taylor, but there are so many other cases in which just being an accomplice is enough to get you indicted. Just being an accomplice, the RICO Act, there's an entire song called RICO. Just being associated to the thing gets you in COINTELPRO, gets you in an FBI watch list, fucks up your whole life forever. So you have to understand the reality, the game that's being played, and then what it is that you can do about it. We'll go over that very quickly. So the reality is that a woman was murdered in her house, and if this was any other circumstance, the person that murdered them would be in prison without any question. And then the only debate would be on how long they stay in prison and what happens to them when they get there. That's what happens to normal people. We've created many artificial groups in American society that marketed themselves, not that the reality is there that these people are here to protect us or these people have our best interests at heart. That's never been the reality. And the very nature of how things are set up, and once you understand how things are set up, it's quite the opposite, in fact, is that these people are here to manage you to ensure that you stay productive. What does that mean? To ensure that you keep making their bosses money. They're overseers. The plantation just got bigger. So Breonna Taylor's death, it's a mark that says that We're not going to stop killing you. We're not going to stop shooting at you. We're not going to stop being afraid of you until you completely and fully comply. And we're willing to buy your compliance. Because that's what they've been doing for so long. They've bought people's dignity. They've bought people's integrity. They've bought people's sodomy. You know, they've bought so many things. They even try to buy people. You know, even in a literal sense within human commodity and false commodity of slavery, you know, to this day. So I wouldn't say be surprised that things went down the way that they did, because it reveals how things have been going and how the system has been set up to keep things in that type of way. It's not that hard to understand America's history. What's very hard is the amount of mental gymnastics that are being played to try to make it seem like it's something that it isn't. If it was the same approach as it is Nazi Germany. So let's just get that flat right out of the way. It is Nazi Germany. This is where many of the Germans came after World War II. You know. So within that, the difference between Nazi Germany, between Norway, between all these white supremacist nations, all these European white supremacist neo-Nazi nations, is America tries to be so diversive and deceptive and delusional about what it is and what it stands for. And it makes it very difficult for the average person to understand or relate or even attempt to be productive within the system that they're living within, because they can never fucking understand what the fuck they're living in. The rules are constantly changing, the people are constantly changing, and there's no real information about what's going on. There's just information about what they want you to think is going on. So we're going to move into the agenda. What is the agenda? The agenda is for you to feel as if the reality doesn't exist, that you've had, the reality is that there is national outrage about the deaths of these people because people died. That's the truth, that's the fact. The very small percentage of people who are supporting this, who are rejoicing it, are doing so behind keyboards, are doing so in closed circles and closed groups, and there honestly is not that many of them, and if it was easier to identify them, they would not exist. If they didn't build a life and build a culture around acquiring resources, acquiring wealth, and getting as rich as possible, then more people will be empowered to, I guess, so to speak, fight back, or at least demand justice, or at least get the right kind of legal protection involved to defend yourself and defend your family. You know, you should have an accountant, you should have a lawyer, you should have someone looking over your affairs, you know. And the tighter relationship that you build with those people, I wouldn't necessarily, the more cases that you have with that person necessarily. You put yourself in a good place when catastrophe strikes, that you have a team around you that can strike back. I feel like Breonna Taylor and Breonna Taylor's family was very much on their own, you know. You had a lot of internet support, but I'm not sure there were a lot of people within their physical circle willing to really step up and do what was necessary to get justice for Breonna Taylor. Or else, instead of trying to get money, and this is the major issue, this is the agenda, is that they want you to be purchasable. The only reason America exists is because they tricked people for centuries to believe in paper currency. Paper currency that is printed. IOU checks. You know? So, to not learn from history and to not understand the game is kind of your own fault. So if you're falling for the trick, there's not much that anybody's going to be able to do with you. You got to choose to personally wake up And like I said in the last video, once you can fix your own bad attitudes and habits, you can fix your own handling of your affairs, handling of your house, then we can have a discussion and a conversation about what the ideal is or what should be allowable, because the life given is manageable, is sustenance, you know? If the life can't provide any sense of stability or longevity, then it's death, because that is the definition of death, temporary and ending. So the agenda makes you want to feel like you're defenseless. It makes you want to feel like it's hopeless. It makes you want to feel as though justice is never going to be served. But the horrific thing is that justice is just a word. Fairness is just a word. Hatred is just a word. We give these words meanings, but the way that we use them sometimes, the way that we attempt to use them, and attempt to use our personal affairs as the affairs of every single person in the world, it's just not it. I wish that things were portrayed differently, and it was a focus on how all lives matter, because then we can talk about equitable standards of treatment for all American people, which would include Black people, African Americans, which would include immigrants, which would include foreign policy, which would also include domestic policy, not so much within the state of welfare, but just like you've been given this stimulus check, I think it would be a positive boon to most people and to most Americans to get some sort of yearly stimulus, some type of yearly stipend to continue living in this country and to make the country do well, since they are printing money to basically trade with their friends. A lot of people are suffering in real life. A lot of people are being murdered. And the reason why things aren't changing for every single person is because we're viewing these all as individual cases. We're viewing them all within a sense of division. We're viewing it all within our personal scope of life. But it doesn't matter if it was Breonna Taylor. It doesn't matter if it was Danny Ives. Death is death. It's final. It's horrific. You're taking someone's family from this face of the world, and that makes you a thief and a murderer. These cops should be in prison. Why are they not in prison? For $12,000. So what you have to then ask yourself was $12 million, not 12,000. Was $12 million the price of Breonna Taylor's life? Or was it the price to buy the freedom of the three white men? At the end of the day, Breonna's name wasn't even really mentioned within the court case. So, you are responsible for your life. Whether Jesus comes back within your lifetime, or he comes back within the next lifetime, so be it. Until then, you're responsible for your life. So this dependence upon white supremacists to fix black neighborhoods is unfair to you, and it's unfair to white supremacy. What do you think white supremacy is? What do you think they're trying to tell you? They're not here to save you. They're not here to help you. And they will do anything to win. And it isn't about you. It's not about your skin color. It's about them. And they will do their damnedest to make you believe that it's about them. And then you will give up generations of your life. You will give up your kids. You will give up your livelihood to see this other person succeed while you slowly die. The relationship between black people and white people, I would say in the last 14,000 years of human history, has never been equitable. It's always been a power struggle between African dominance, between Britannian dominance, Roman dominance. You can't say white because white happened far after that. And that became more of a universal scapegoat to hide the neo-Nazis, basically. If you're not a part of the problem and you don't have a solution, be quiet. You trying to speak up for white supremacy, you trying to talk like, well, I don't have to go through that. And well, I am a Puerto Rican and oh my God, Dios mío, lo siento, but you black people really need to get it together because I'm basically black. No, you're not basically black. You're not basically like us. You're nothing like us. You want to be us. All of you want to be us. And you want to be us so bad, you do your best and you do your damnedest to stop us from being us. The solution, allow black people to be who they are as people. Stop making them just be black. Because what is blackness? Blackness is an absence of culture. It's an absence of country. It's an absence of identity. Give them the power of being African American, to have an entire continent and an entire country that is their domain to flourish and multiply upon. Our God-given right? The American-given right to truth, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It does not say justice. You're not entitled to justice in America, but you are entitled to build a life that if something happens to you, those around you can ensure that there is justice. You don't have to be a victim to white supremacy because most white supremacists are powerless. Unless they can manipulate other people, unless they can recruit, and they're doing that. I won't lie and say that they aren't. But if those means are destroyed or something else is put in its place and a new ideology, a new religion is created, not some Luciferian satanic bullshit, and not even a religion within the certain terms. My friend just told me truth is not a religion. You can't deny the existence of God. You can't deny the existence of evil. And whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to name it, whatever you want to say it looks like, it doesn't really matter, because it will never capture the reality of how evil cripples and destroys and manipulates and deceives and distracts and takes away from people's lives so deeply and so heavily. Breonna Taylor's death should have marked the end of white supremacy. It should have marked white men going to prison for the crimes of their forefathers. And it's not. It's more white men getting to get away with a slap on the wrist for committing crimes against humanity, crimes against their country, and crimes against their God in the name of white supremacy. White supremacy can't supersede God's law. This bullshit about Ahab and Jacob, Esau and Jacob, there's no real difference between the two. It's the exact same thing that's happening now. And that's what they're basically giving you. Them giving you money is the equivalent to Jacob giving Esau the soup or the stew. It's horrific. This entire system of chattel slavery is the children of Esau, the Edomites, trying so desperately and so hard to reclaim their dominance over Israel, over their brother. Why? Because at the end of the day, their mother chose Jacob, their father chose Jacob, and Jacob chose Jacob. And Esau chose a bowl of soup. Choosing the money rather than choosing your integrity, choosing your dignity, The problem is that the motherfucker in jail, the ex-boyfriend, had more integrity and had more fucking dignity than the motherfuckers outside who would never be able to do time for that or never be able to stand being attacked or getting death threats or shit like that for pursuing the arrest of these men. They weren't ready to go to war for Breonna Taylor. That's why Breonna Taylor was working during COVID-19. That baby girl should have been home. And a lot of us men really need to stand up, and no matter what you do to provide that much more. If you provide wisdom, re-educate yourself, and you read deeper, and you get deeper into your word, and you get deeper in your relationship to God. So you're not just preaching and abusing, you're teaching and you're educating, and you're living by example so that you don't even have to speak on it. They can watch you and see what to do. Instead, we just open our women up to so many dangers in this world. And it's dangers that we know and that we intentionally encounter, and we do nothing to stop. We just attempt to keep living in a world of evil. And we never try to end the evil within ourselves. We just excuse it because other people are evil. The real solution is stop defending evil. Stop defending sin. Stop defending vice. If you got a problem, say you got a problem. If you got a habit, say you got a habit. If you're doing it for enjoyment, stand behind the fact that you do it for enjoyment. Budget it properly, and understand that when you don't need enjoyment and you don't need dopamine, you don't need to be using. You can take a break for a couple of days. You can take a break for a couple of weeks. Get the new job, Start the new business up. Do what you got to do, quite honestly. But stop allowing Satan to control your life. Because it's deeper than religion. It's deeper than this freedom of destroying your body and destroying your temple. Because it's so easy to tell people to destroy their temple. Because that's what's been going on. Let us have your artifacts. Let us have your ruins. Let us have your riches. Let us have your time. Let us have your energy. You're not using it properly. I'll use it for you. Come work for me instead of working for yourself, doing the exact same thing that you would do for me for more money. That's crazy, man. It really is crazy. But you really got to be able to take a bit of time for yourself and for what you're building and for what you're creating, and just focus on that. Because sadly, whether this ends peacefully or whether this ends violently, people are going to die regardless. People are going to die regardless. People are going to spend money regardless. People are still going to need to live regardless. So instead of us focusing upon the death, instead of us focusing upon the misery, instead of us focusing upon how hurt and how much agony we feel like we're going through, we have to focus upon the positive. We have to count the victories. We have to give people roses while they're still alive, because if not, people will die in vain. If people are going to die regardless, let them die being a contributing member of society. Let their life mean something. So when it's over, we can rejoice in the legacy that they left. Instead, people are living and dying, and all they've done is work or be abused or be molested or be raped or be born or want to be born, but the parents got an abortion. That shit hurts, man. It's painful. Murder is wrong because murder is wrong. Assassination is wrong because assassination is wrong. And these cops are going to suffer, and they're going to bleed out over this for legacies and for generations. Their entire family is going to sadly be cursed. Like, they are officially a generational curse. They've officially forsaken their vows. They've officially forsaken their covenant with God, and they would have rather maintained their white supremacy. They rather maintain their control over us and control over the government and control over the economy, then save us. They're watching us die while they bicker over who gets to be in charge. This has revealed nothing more than the utter failures of white supremacy and Western culture. And you can already see that a new culture is forming, a culture of acceptance, a culture of love, a culture of tolerance, a culture of understanding and patience, a culture that encourages self-care rather than self-abuse, that encourages healthy habits and partying and being social rather than drinking because you're exhausted from work and you're miserable, and then abusing your wife and abusing your children. You know? Those of us who don't feel like we're going to be good parents aren't having kids. Those of us who are having having kids, are being supported by the ones that don't. So our generation will be fine. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to look back upon this, and this is going to be the new Civil War. This is going to be the new World War III. This is going to be the new Cold War. Because there can't be an all-out offensive right now. But you're not going to win dying. You're not going to win by fighting. The only way that you're going to win is through your lifestyle and fixing your own house, fixing your own life, fixing your own neighborhood, working with your own local police. And if your local police don't want to work with you and they don't want to end this and they're too big and up in their ways, then you might have to go over them, or you might have to invoke your Second Amendment rights, whether you're white, black, Asian, or otherwise. If they aren't trying to stop murdering black people, I'm not going to say that black people need to start murdering white people, because that's highly unnecessary. The entire point is that the violence is unnecessary. The violence is the issue, the violence is the problem, and the violence needs to stop. The violence doesn't come from toxic masculinity. It doesn't come from toxic femininity. It comes from greed. It comes from selfishness. It comes from jealousy. It comes from envy. It comes from demons. It comes from spirits. It comes from sin. It comes from people rebelling against God and wanting anything but God's truth and God's word to be right. Because God chose Jacob. And God did not choose Esau.